are the four pillars, what I consider the four pillars of human performance, right? So one is mindset, two is movement, the third one is recovery, and then nutrition. But the mindset's the most important because if you don't have the will or the drive, okay, or the belief to take yourself from one spot to the other, more than likely that's where people fail. So we want to start with the mindset. Where do you want to go? What are your goals? And how we're going to help you accomplish that in a way you understand.
Hello and welcome to Wise Nutrition Podcast, the podcast that brings you conversations about nutritional, health, mindset, and training topics. I'm your host, a certified nutrition coach Daniel Weiss, and thank you for tuning in. My special guest today is Dr. David Brown, who goes by name Dr. Exercise. Besides many high-performance David coaches one of my previous podcast guests, Rebecca Clements. And our conversation today is centered around how to be the best athlete or a coach that you can be and what it takes to get there. If you like the podcast and you haven't done so already, please consider leaving a rating and a review online. And similarly, if you could share news about this podcast, I will be really glad and thankful. It would be great. And thank you for all of you who continue to do that. So once again, David, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And you have been like a coach for Olympic weightlifters, and you have a lot of experience, it seems, also with your daughter. And actually, one of my previous podcast episodes was with Simply Whimsical, as she goes on Instagram, aka Rebecca Clements, who is, as far as I know, one of your trainees, and she actually recommended you. So did I ask you to join us for one of the podcast episodes? So can you tell us more about yourself? What's your specialty and what's your passion?
I'm sorry, the question kind of trailed off a little bit. So it kind of got hollow on my end. So you're talking about training with Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I will repeat my question. In one of the one of the previous episodes was with Rebecca actually, and she recommended you. And as far as I know, she's one of your trainees. So maybe
yes.
You can introduce yourself, because I believe you have vast experience in strength training, powerlifting, and also, as far as I know, your daughter was now at Youth Olympics in Olympic weightlifting, if I'm right.
Yes, I was the head coach for the team as well there. So
Right. So can you tell us more about your expertise?
okay. So my experience comes from I have a degree in education. I have a master's in kinesiology, and I have a doctorate in health science. Specialize in healthcare and organizational behavior and leadership. So going back from the time from being a high school, college athlete, and then going into the military. When I got done with that, I did police sports while I was a police officer. But the whole time I was also involved with strength conditioning at the high school level at two of the large high schools in my home state. When I got done with that, I decided to go back to school and actually go back and do more strength conditioning as a whole. And from there, that's where I created the persona of Dr. Exercise. So after I finished my doctorate, I created that to separate myself from what I like to consider to be the global gym factor, because under personal training atmosphere, just about anybody could be a personal trainer in America, and it's not regulated. So I want to fix that somehow.
Right. So you want to give like quality exercise regimes and really help people, right?
I'm sorry, shut off a little bit, but are you there?
Yeah, no, it's better. So, yeah, it seems like you wanted to really help people with their strength and conditioning, instead of, like you mentioned, like global gym factor or aspect. People who go there and just do exercise, and they have quote unquote personal trainers who don't care as much.
Yeah. So my whole aspect is I like to use evidence-based practices as far as strength conditioning, which means whenever I prescribe something to somebody, it is actually based on the research. Okay. There's more than enough research out there to where there's really not anything we're creating that's new. We may be taking parts of research from different pieces and make it into to fit into a philosophy, but it's not something new. For the most part, the human body has not evolved in almost about 1 million years. Okay, so trying to go outside that and think you're creating something, I just think that's false science. Um, and you're starting to hurt people in the long run. So you're looking more short term versus long term. So I want to look at it from a holistic standpoint, and that's where the E3 also came from.
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting topic, because nowadays there are a lot of people, maybe including myself, who are interested like in improving the lives and health of other people, and they started by, let's say, trying to help themselves. And like you said, I see it all the time on social media that there are, or different people have different philosophies when it comes to training and nutrition and health, and some of them fall into that category of like biohackers and so on. And some people follow these evidence-based practices. So, what do you actually think about these people who are in that area of like biohacking and trying all this new stuff? Is it something that we can, let's say, rely on, or is it something that can even hurt people, or what do you think about it?
If I understand the question correctly, my whole thought is I think exercise specialists need to actually have a understanding of a variety of like applications for lack of a better term. So it comes to nutrition. Okay, you got vegan, you got people who believe in keto diets, you got people who believe in paleo diets. Okay, but coming from an expert, well, not even an expert, coming from a professional standpoint, I think have an understanding in all those because certain factors will affect people or different people a certain way. And you have to be able to adapt to the people instead of having people adapt to you, right? Especially when you're trying to get results out. So, there's a lot of stuff that's out there. Does it work? There's a lot of things that work. A lot of it is actually short term. And I look for more things that are going to be more long term, with short term applications. You know what I mean?
Right, I'm with you on that. So, what is your actual the E3 phytology about? Because I saw it on the social media. It included things like mindset and movement, nutrition, and recovery to maximize personal performance, and this sounds very, very interesting.
Right. So what E3 actually stands for is educate, empower, and enrich. So we want to educate people on how to take the research and actually apply it, based regardless of your interpretation, right? And then through the education piece, we empower people to go out there and be in charge of um, their lives and how they're going to get done or how they're going to accomplish the goals they want to physically and either performance based, either health based, or even just lifestyle based, right? So if you want to be an athlete, we're going to teach you how to go do that and put proper programming in place and get that done. If you have a health issue like you're a diabetic, we're going to use evidence based practices and protocols to help you get you back to normal and then help you actually graduate from normal to improved quality of life. And then the lifestyle, say you're not either one, but you're going to the gym because you're looking just to be healthy. You're looking to be a lifestyle because you want longevity in your life. You want to grow up and dance with your daughter at her wedding. or you want to play with your kids, when your grandkids, when you get a chance, we help you get through that as well. Now, where you're talking about, so what we're educating you on are the four pillars, what I consider the four pillars of human performance, right? So one is mindset, two is movement, the third one is recovery, and then nutrition. Now, nutrition comes in part of recovery along with sleep and all that kind of stuff, but it has a dual application, right? So that's where we look at it. But the mindset's the most important, because if you don't have the will or the drive, okay, or the belief to take yourself from one spot to the other, more than likely that's where people fail. So we want to start with the mindset. Where do you want to go? What are your goals? And how we're going to help you accomplish that in a way you understand. That's what we want to get to, because when you do that, then your movements are going to be better. You're going to actually be more focused on the movement and get that done. Now, remember, okay, exercise is predicated on just a couple of things, right? It's predicated on training, stress, recovery, and then adaptation. Okay. So that's where the movement comes from. So with that in there, that goes from the movement. We want to exercise. I say we want to exercise the muscle. Okay. We want to train the movement, and we want to practice the skill or the technique. Okay. So those are my pillars underneath movement. So we want to train the muscle, based on lifestyle. You want to get strength. You want to get exercise endurance. Whether you're doing CrossFit, whether you're doing trying to move on and get into doing some kind of other sport like triathlons or something like that, or taekwondo, we get your body set for that. We're trying to get the strength going on, because strength, if you improve the strength in a muscle, it can actually go ahead and pull the muscle to shorten the joints to actually help you improve your technique. But the thing that's also important is, because you're stressing it out, the fact that what happens when you stress those muscles out, you need to actually recover, because when you're actually doing the work, you're actually tearing it down. You get stronger when you're recovering, and people tend to forget that, especially when they're trying to work out 2 to 3 times a day and they're not doing anything to allow themselves to recover and get stronger in the positions that they're trying to improve on, right? And that's where nutrition and the sleep, different ways to recover. Sleep to me is the most important. Okay, trying to reduce inflammation in certain joints is also important. Trying to get the nutrients to recover and help your body repair. Obviously, that's when the nutrition comes in, which is, it can't be beat, honestly. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that.
Yeah, you cannot outrun bad diet, right?
Yes. What you put in your body to help your body refuel, and then get that move through to actually rebuild on what you tore down while you're training.
So do you actually get a lot of clients or inquiries from people who want to train with you or get involved with you, and that they don't have the right mindset, so you have to turn them down?
Actually, that's one of the things I do. So when I actually go through my assessment, so when people want to work with me, we do assessments to get in, because I believe in, if you don't assess, you're guessing. I don't like to guess, because then I'm not helping people maximize and make the exercise or the program we're putting them in through efficient, specifically for that individual, right? So in other words, in science, you say N equals 1. N equals being the random size being an individual person. And every program put together specifies for that one individual person. So we do things. I do DNA testing, right? I do DNA testing for nutrition. Do DNA testing for performance. I do DNA testing to check out and see what their factors and indicators are based on their genetic markers. So we can actually, doesn't mean we're not going to say you can't work out, but what do we have to do to help you reach your goals as safely, as effectively, and as efficaciously as possible? But the main thing is, are they willing to do the work? Do they have the intrinsic motivation to get it done? Are they willing to get it done at that time? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like you go to your doctor says you have this illness, and here's medicine. If you're not willing to take the medicine to help you get better, then what good did the doctor visit do you?
Yeah, nothing. So what kind of DNA tests do you run on your clients when it comes to nutrition. That's pretty interesting.
I have a company, so I just do a cheek swab, and it depends on what we're testing for. We can test anywhere from 54 to 110 markers, and to get your genetic makeup. Okay. But also we determine your nutrition from there. We can also do sport identification from it, and we also have one I do for anti-aging, saying here's some factors that you need to consider for anti-aging, including your micronutrients, your macronutrients, your exercise duration.
That's interesting because this is actually the first time that I'm hearing about these things, like not about DNA testing for nutrition in general, but the specifics that you have just mentioned. So it's like, yeah, very interesting stuff. So do you actually, when it comes to nutrition, test for like basically like glucose sensitivity or amylase and these things?
Yeah, so looking at your genetic markers, we can actually sit there and say, okay, based on your genetic markers, you're more likely going to have a tendency to either use carbohydrates more or use fat more, or you might be in a position to where you can actually use both. So it doesn't matter what how we do your macronutrient makeup, your body's going to utilize them more, right? And then we tell you, okay, you can use this amount of protein or this one. Now that's only a matter for a general setting, because you still have to make adjustments for sport, your environment that you're also trying to get done, which also
Right.
has a different marker. However, when it comes to the carbohydrates and the fats, we can tell that how your body's going to use those, or we can try to predict how your body's going to use those from the makeup, depending on how, you know, what the results come back from the test. We can also
So basically,
go ahead.
yeah, go on.
As far as sports performance, we can actually determine, if you're going to be more for a power sport, set up more for endurance type of athletics. Um, and so we can actually start doing markers on that too, and help you guide towards more activities that your body's going to be more natural to attract to, or which way you're going to want to go and be more successful at.
Right, and I guess that this is more for people who are like on a advanced or elite level, as compared to people who just want to change their lifestyle.
Exactly. Now, even then, I've had athletes that were what we call genetic freaks in certain sports. As far as as we talk about weightlifting a little bit. However, they don't have the mindset to continue to do that sport. So, you know, they might have a genetic
Yeah.
potential, but that's why mindset's so important. They don't have the motivation to continue there. There's other environmental factors that are interfering with them being successful in the sport. Right? They just don't have the drive to do it.
Right, and that's why it's so important to have these kind of intake goals. Which actually brings me to another question: is like how to, from your perspective, how to be a great coach. What do you think that there is needed to bring the best out of people?
So that's interesting, because I'm actually doing a project, and that's exactly what I'm working on right now, is the coaching education. But where I want to start with is, everybody always talks about communication, right? Us as humans, the most important thing to us is communication and connectiveness with people. Um, so I think the first thing to be a great coach, you have to understand what your motivation is, also what your behavioral style is, right? There's typically different behavioral styles, and how words affect you, what body language affects you, what tone and pace affects you. For instance, listen on this thing, I talk fast. Okay. Um,
Right,
some people,
but that's also not all the time.
right. And some people get offended because I talk fast. They want to talk more slow. They don't want me to raise my voice. They want my tone to be more even keeled. Um, but if you have an athlete like that, what do you do? Do I talk fast to them, or do I have to adapt to get them? In other words, to improve my communication with somebody, I typically want to adapt to their style, which means I have to understand what my style is first and accept it. That's my style. But at the same time, I have to understand that the other person is different or may be different. So in order for them to actually want to listen to me, and so we can actually have a better relationship, I have to adapt what I'm doing to fit their style, so that they can actually take in the communication that I'm trying to give them to help them be a better athlete, um, be a better, improve their health, or just to actually gain their trust. So that's the first one for me. So the healthy communication, you have to keep those in place. Understand me, myself, accept who I am, understand what other people are, and as Carl Jung used to say, accept the otherness of the other. Do something for the other person so that they actually trust you, and then actually take in what you say and then use what you're giving them. To me, that is very important, and that's where the communication piece comes in. Um, the second piece is understanding your motivation, understand the athlete's motivation and why they're doing what they're doing, what they're willing to do to accomplish their goals, or what they're not willing to do to accomplish their goals. Because you have to use that information. And when you get that information, you can actually, when you do the program for them, you can put that in. For instance, I may have an athlete that still wants to maybe go to the Olympics, or maybe even just compete at a local bodybuilding show. I still have to know why they're doing it. What's their motivation? Are they doing it because you're a former athlete and they want to continue just to compete in something, or are they actually trying to because they used to weigh quite a bit, and now they just want to use something as a goal to keep them going in to actually drop weight.
Right. Understanding this motivation behind is really, really important from the perspective of even maybe not even reaching the goals, but being able to sticking with them for the long term.
Correct. Yeah. And so when you actually understand the person's behavioral style and their driving forces is what we'll call it, from there you can actually go ahead and make plans for that particular person to be successful. And I think that's what a good coach does. Mm-hmm. A good coach has to know quite a bit about the field, even if he doesn't know, admit that he doesn't know, but then have a toolbox or a network where you can reach out to help that person get the answers that they need quickly.
Definitely. And what has been the most challenging aspect of coaching for you?
The most challenging aspects for coaching and for me is actually helping people understand that it's okay to fail in practice. Mm-hmm. The human nature is to actually be right. Okay. Everything we do, the perceptions we try to set out there is to prove that we're right. But when you get in practice, the hardest thing is get people to say, you know what? My job as a coach is actually to stress your body out so you can actually grow. But if you're afraid to fail, then you're actually preventing yourself from growing because you're not allowing yourself to stress yourself, to reach. So that's been the hardest one, to get people to reach further than they think they can.
Mm-hmm. And I think in order to do that, you first need to have a certain level of certainty of your skills, of your knowledge, and how did you actually reach that? How did you build it up?
How did I build it up, or did the athlete build it up, is what you're asking?
Well, I think that's a two-part question. How did you build it up as a coach?
As a coach, how I built it up is realize I don't know anything. Regardless of what my education level is, the one thing I realized, the more education I got, is less I knew. I have more questions than I have answers. So continuously to try to grow myself as a coach, and try to find answers. And then so I can apply those to when the situations present themselves is very important. So constant learning, continuing education. So you have some certifications, they say, okay, you got to do 20 hours of continuous education. I think that's wrong. I think you got to pull in 2 hours a day of continuous education.
Yeah.
And I think spend time away researching stuff, finding answers.
Right. And I think the similar answer would be also from the athlete's perspective. You constantly want to learn, want to be curious about new things, and constantly practice.
And that's exactly it. I mean, one of the greatest people, probably two of them, one, the other one's my daughter, the whole time growing up, when she would make a mistake, and even in gymnastics, not even in weightlifting, she would say, that's okay, I didn't get it today, I got to keep practicing and it will get better.
Right.
That was just her mindset. We talked about Rebecca. She is great at that. You want to talk about somebody that just wants to learn anything she can? She's out there constantly seeking mentors, constantly seeking knowledge to get herself better for herself and for her clients.
Right.
And then her drive is out of this world. You know, that's just as much as coaches sometimes like to take credit for it. I don't get the credit for what her or my daughter have accomplished. That is all theirs. I'm just a facilitator.
Totally. You remind me of another person who I did a podcast with and who I'm cooperating with, and he's like a sports psychologist. He would say, I think, the same thing regarding being the facilitator of change, but not taking credit for the change that the person achieves. So I think there's a big...
You're right. And that's absolutely right. So when I sit there and I look at it, there's some coaches I sit there where they're really trying to push their athletes because they're either trying to do it to improve their business, put their name out there to say, I'm an expert, I got these high end clients and all that kind of stuff, which is all good. And yeah, you need to make money so you can accomplish your mission. But is your mission there to actually improve other people, or is your mission there to improve you and improve your name? I think that's where the difference comes in. But the fact of the coaches that I actually see where they're actually trying to push their name, when their athlete doesn't succeed or reach the goals that they wanted to, do you see those coaches take credit for that athlete, quote unquote, failing? No, but they'll take credit. They'll blame the athlete, but they'll take credit when their athlete succeeds. My philosophy is if you're not going to take credit for the athlete failing, you can't take credit when they succeed.
Right. Definitely. I completely agree with that. So...
Right.
Yeah, that's a interesting conversation we started having here regarding the coaching and all of these things. And I think that these kind of coaches who actually want to make their name through their athletes, and like you mentioned, probably the most successful coaches are not very known. And I see it just generally speaking, like on social media, there are a lot of people who lot of knowledge, like yourself, and they generally don't have a big followings, while there are people who have like really huge followings that they don't know as much, like they are just popular. And there is a difference between popularity and knowledge or actual what they bring into the game. So, and I see that I saw that in myself, and I see it constantly in like people who are new to coaching, that they try hard, right? And they mistake this kind of popularity for being knowledgeable and being useful, I would say.
Well, that's exactly right. And, honestly, one of the things I'm fighting right now is just that. I'm actually trying to reach more people through my athletes, through my service. You look at my Instagram page, I try not to put myself in the picture. Meanwhile, I'm being asked, Dave, do more videos, get out there, it doesn't seem like your Instagram page doesn't seem authentic because you're not out there, you're not in front. I don't want to be out in front. Every picture you see up there is a picture of an athlete or somebody I've been in contact with. It's about them. It's not about me.
Right.
I get pleasure in the back end from the success they have. Hey, they trusted me. I appreciate them trusting me to help them achieve their goals. It's their goals that's important to me.
Right.
I get success, on the back end when they're done. I'm happy to stand behind a curtain and smile all day long.
Yeah.
Watching them out there flourish.
That actually reminds me of one of the quotes from my online mentors, Jeffrey Combs. I don't know if you know him. And let me paraphrase it. I think he's put that question like, do you want to be recognized or successful? So there's two different things.
Exactly. I'd rather be successful. And you know why? Because when I pass from this world, the legacy I leave it's not going to be because they saw my face. It's going to be because the number of people I've been able to touch through practice. And when everybody else touches, your reach becomes more exponential through their success.
Definitely. I really love to have these kind of deep conversations. Actually, one of your athletes, as I was scrolling through your Instagram page, I think her name was Sarah, and you actually wrote in one of those posts that she simultaneously lost body fat, increased lean muscle mass, and increased her strength. So that's something that is thought to be like very hard to do or even impossible to do, especially with a person who is like not new to training. So can you tell us more about Sarah and how you helped her achieve that things?
The Sarah I believe you're talking about is actually my wife.
Okay.
But yeah, so I don't fall into the thing where people say you can't build muscle while you're actually in a deficit. Well, or you can't build strength at the same time. I don't know how that is because you've seen a lot of athletes are in weight classes. They do it all the time if they do it appropriately, right? I did the same thing with my daughter. So we're talking about Sarah, then we got Peyton. Did the same thing with Rebecca. Their lean muscle mass increased while they were dieting down for shows, which means they were dropping body fat. Their strength went up because their muscles are still being fed, and their recovery period allowed them to actually increase strength, which actually allowed them to increase more muscle density.
So,
but the fat was going away.
So how is that possible? What's the magic?
There's no magic. The main thing is is just realize it's time. Nothing's going to happen fast, right? But it's just a matter of keeping an eye on it. For instance, when we're watching, because I do assessments. So when I do assessments, I actually check body fat using ultrasound, not skin fold. And so because that was important as far as where it's coming from the outside in. So as I was testing their body fat, then I knew where their muscle, so where their weight was. Their skin fold numbers are going down, so their adipose tissue number was going down, but yet their lean muscle mass and their fluid volume were going up. Okay, So what did we do? We put them in a deficit, as you do everything else. But then I also I put more fat in, took carbohydrates away. Just remove those. But the proteins went up. Okay. So again, it doesn't matter. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I suppose that you also manipulated the nutrition timing, right? Like eating mostly around the workouts.
I increased the time under tension and the workouts. So the nutrition went right along with the workouts, including rest days where the calories were even lower. They had to rest, to recover, but they're still getting the nutrition in. On top of it, the amount of exercise we did, right? Because you're talking about when you go a higher intensity, it's also muscle sparing. Okay. Then you also start talking about manipulating the endocrine system through the repetitions and exercise and rest periods. Okay. Charles Peliquin did quite a bit of it. I mean, there's research out there that shows you can actually, depends on how heavy you went or the rest period you had, you can actually go ahead and have a direct impact on testosterone or the human growth hormones, right? So we test those sites, and then we can tell, okay, based on these sites, this person is going to androgenic. For a female, we're talking about on the back of the tricep, also on the bellicus and the belly, or on the top of the knee. But the ones that, or the research actually shows that indicates insulin sensitivity, so you can actually determine I need to go get more testosterone through exercise. So we're going to do this format. We're going to go heavier. We're going to go to 12, 15 repetitions, and we're actually going to take 30 to 45 seconds rest. We want to get them and push their lactic threshold levels to get their testosterone up.
Right. That sounds interesting. I'm not very well in the terms of exercise, so that's all new stuff to me. So I'm more educated in terms of nutrition itself. So uh, that was something that I could ask more about. But it seems like basically you went more into this ranges when it comes to lighter weights and more repetitions, so more like I would not call it aerobic style of training, but more erring more on that side.
Yeah, it wouldn't be aerobic style training because, you look at the energy systems, and I believe that's what that was referring to. So I stayed mainly in the phosphagen and anaerobic glycolic phases of the exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Also, another thing I don't do that you typically see in like the physique world, they'll actually lift heavy to try to get bigger muscle bellies, what they call their bulking phase of the season, right? But
Right.
then all of a sudden they go high repetitions, 20 to 25 when they're getting ready for their shows. And that's why they think they're losing muscle. Well, if you want to maintain your muscle, continue lifting heavy and let the diet take off the fat. The muscles will continue to get strong because remember, you have the said principle. If you exercise the muscles stay strong, they will actually break down and get strength and they can actually still grow. But if you actually change it and take it to a different factor, because when you go to memory, when we go to 20, 25 repetitions, you're working a different muscle fiber,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
So
And you're working, go ahead.
and you don't need to do things like increase cardio and those things.
Correct. So just take your time, start out far enough, and don't go to extreme. Still do the recovery. Still sit there and have them program them correctly and design the nutrition around the way you're programming the exercise. But just kind of like, you know what? Let's put it this way. Would you actually invite somebody to the dance? Invite them to the prom. Once you get to the prom, you're going to go dance with your friend's girlfriend.
Hopefully not.
No. Dance with the girl who got you to the prom. Stay with your date. So if you're lifting heavy off season and you're going through the periodization tables where you're going through 4 to 6 repetitions, 6 to 12, and 12 to 15, and then you repeat that, just keep doing that while you're preparing for the show and just move your nutrition around.
Mm-hmm.
Go into a
Right.
deficit.
So now I'm trying to wrap my mind around it because you really blew my mind. And actually, how to use that in terms of like in combination with conditioning, because my main sport and most of my listeners like are on the endurance side, and I'm not sure if you are aware, like OCR, which is like obstacle course racing, which is
Yes, I am.
mostly based on. Oh, okay, perfect. So it's mostly endurance based, but you also need to build strength or have a certain amount of strength, right?
Correct.
And the typical what is said like in bodybuilding communities, right? Like cardio kills your gains and things like this. So it's not completely true. And what would be the best practice for an OCR athlete who wants to simultaneously build strength, power, and also keep or improve their endurance? So they need to do a lot of cardio as well.
Okay. So typically, when I actually had them, for instance, I actually had several people that wanted to get to they wanted to qualify for the Boston Marathon. A couple of things I did with them to help them improve their strength. I helped them recognize my job would get you to the 21-mile mark. Your job in your mind is going to get you to the 26.2-mile mark. Okay. So we actually just broke them down and what our strength we based on. So instead of doing all power, we actually focus more on the higher rep ranges. Okay. Body weight, total body, things that help them get over, like for as far as obstacle course racing. You have to do a lot of upper body strength in between your runs. And then you got the legs, and then you have to get them down. So we did quite a bit. Like you're going to do walkie lunges for 400 meters. Okay. When you get done with that, you're going to jog for 400 meters. And then when you get with that, you're actually going to give me 12 or 15 um, jumping pull-ups over on that bar, because now their body's getting used to the energy systems. You're going back and forth, because when you're doing obstacle course racing, you are using the phosphagen, you are using anaerobic glycolic, but you're also using the aerobic capacity, right? So when you do, so
Exactly.
understanding the competition model that the person's doing and have them work within that competition model is just strength conditioning principles. Okay, but one thing,
Mhm. So basically, simulate the race during the training.
correct, and but you do it with training. You train the movements that they're going to be doing, and you're actually providing strength in those movements, because you can use resistance bands on them, or you can actually have them do more than what they're typically going to do on the platform. Okay, you're only going to use, it's going to take you 6 arm extensions to get up on that wall. So what we're going to do, we're going to stress that out. We're going to have you do 12 pull-ups, which is an arm extension and a pull, to mimic that movement. That's where we say we train the movement, and during that, you're actually going to increase your strength. But once you get into the obstacle course race, then you're able to get through it. I mean, I did obstacle course races. I mean, I did the men's health Urbanathon a couple of times. Obstacle courses were, I mean, getting over the obstacles, I was great. I had the power input to do it. In between is where I didn't do so well. I was able to slug myself through the aerobic capacity of it, right? But meanwhile, I had other people that actually, I had other athletes that I had, the aerobic part, they did that well, and then I had to help them with the obstacle course, but they were trained for it. So it's just a matter of where we sit. Okay. I mean, even when I was in the military, I actually was on what they call a combat team, which means we got together, we ran obstacle courses, a mile and a half obstacle course, the stuff you see, in some movies and sometimes on shows, which actually was kind of fun. Um, but I was on the team because I was the strong one on the obstacles. So I was able to get to the obstacle first, and I had enough strength left over to where I assisted everybody else. And then they had to help me through the runs.
What were they pulling you?
Well, sometimes, you just undo your belt halfway and let me grab onto it and you drag me.
Like
But
in OCR, like world championships, there are also like team relays where you have like team of 3 people, and one person is like a runner, the other part is strength based, and the third part is that all 3 of them do together. So it's like, yeah, you would excel in that strength part, somebody will be pulling the running part, and then pulling you, the 2 of them would pull you through the third part that you would do all together. I think you could excel in that.
yes, and so it's just a matter, again what your sport is. But if you go and look at it, you're just trying to push your body. You know, the scientific terms when you're talking about the lactic threshold is millimoles. You're trying to increase the millimoles to get the lactic threshold pushed up, even when you're doing obstacle courses, and that's where you stress out. And over time, you push that lactic threshold level. So when you're doing obstacle course training, marathon training, you're trying to push that, and that's where people get faster for a longer period of time. That's where the muscular endurance comes in.
Yeah, definitely. So
But you
let's
always
talk.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
go on.
The nutrition factor for an obstacle course racer, though, is actually going to be more carbohydrates versus more fats, though, and they don't need as
Yeah,
much.
definitely, because of the systems that you are using actually during the training.
Correct, and you don't need as much protein intake.
Yeah, as compared to a bodybuilder, for example, or powerlifter.
Right. So typically for a bodybuilder or somebody who's doing a strength sport, you're looking at about, they talk about anywhere between zero point 0.8 and 1.2, okay, grams per body weight. As far as an endurance, you can actually move that down. It's below 0 0.8. Typically it's going to be
Yeah.
between about 15 to 20% of their daily caloric intake.
Yeah, and I see that like even at 15%, it's it can creep into like 2 grams per kilogram when it comes to protein, just because of the high calorie amount.
Correct. So, and then you got to look at the total energy expenditure that the athlete's taking in. Okay. You look at the average man walking around, he probably needs about 1,800 calories, 5'10", 170 pounds. You get taller than that, you need more calories. That's just to walk around every day and think. But when you start adding um, the exercise, right? You start adding your running, you start adding your obstacle course, start adding your workouts in. Then you really need to understand how much energy you're expelling, because you still need to be in a surplus to keep moving. You need to at least take it in to at least balance it out. Otherwise, you're going to be dropping weight.
Right, definitely. Unless you want to do body recomposition like we
Correct.
mentioned before. So, actually, when we were speaking about nutrition, also and we mentioned Rebecca, and she's like in a kind of special situation as she's vegan.
Right.
So, was it actually challenging to get her to get like lower carbohydrates, because plants are very rich in carbohydrates while pretty low on protein and especially leucine. So was it challenging from that perspective?
The most challenging part for me was, you know, first of all, because I'm not vegan, so I had to accept Rebecca's principles, and again, because it's based on the individual athlete, knowing that she was vegan, I just had to sit there, and my biggest thing is all I did was sit there and make sure her micronutrients were being incorporated. She was hitting the right amount. Like for instance, her vitamin D levels were at least high, which is almost 8,000 IU's. Okay, um, I had to make sure the
Mm-hmm.
micros were getting in, but then just actually I just did the regular percentages: protein, carbohydrates, and fats, and 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 let her actually design what foods that she liked. So it was based on what she liked, but using the
Okay.
macros that I know to get it done. But then focused on the macros.
Mm-hmm. I think that actually the micros or micronutrients is something that is not spoken much about. It's always about like macros. What's the best macros? What kind of macros do you follow? And nobody gives a shit about micronutrients.
Right, which is sad because you got to remember the micros are actually what helps the body, um, synthesize the macros.
Mhm. Yeah.
So if you don't have, if your macros aren't balanced, or relatively close to where they need to be, good luck. You're going to be eating a lot and wasting a lot of it. And that's my view, but nobody's been able to prove me wrong
Mhm.
yet.
Yeah, and it's also helps you to with recovery, with stress, and this is something that we can dive into right now. Right now, like what would be the best uh, things or best practices for these hardworking athletes to actually recover from the workouts. And we already mentioned some of those things like sleep and nutrition and micronutrients, but let's recap it.
Yeah. So first of all, let's just keep it. So first of all, acute fatigue is what happens when your body starts to break down in the middle of the exercise, but that's actually needed to help your body um, to stop from the work output or slow it down and keep it under control. Okay. Um, but the primary recovery poses that most people do, I read a quick list. I actually happen to have it in front of me, like I said. So the first one is complete rest. Take a day off, right? And the other one's active recovery. A lot of times, and I did this with we'll keep talking about Rebecca, typically on Sundays, which is her day off out of the gym. She just did 45-minute, nice, easy, steady state recovery. That's active rest. Keep the body just moving, push the blood through, help the nutrients get through the muscles, and help it recover. Okay. Um, Adjust your training when you have to. Sometimes you get athletes that are just so stuck and they have to follow the training the way their coaches or their or specialists write it down. step by step every rep. And they're not listening to the body that's trying to get that acute fatigue portion in and say, hey, you need to slow down. We're not able to do this today. And they don't do that. So being able to adjust the training, okay, you got to be flexible in the training. Sleep is the most important thing that I think people need to get into. Okay, so there's several factors around that one. Nutrition is the next one. Hydration is something that's also something that is not talked about a lot for people as far as recovery goes. Um, then we talk about hydrotherapy. Okay, that's more like you can get into massage, compression. Okay, those are some of the things I think you're referring to help them recover. So the main thing to consider when you're actually looking at what recovery methods you're going to do, I think, is to talk about the type of training you're doing, your training environment that you're getting into, and the sport that you're doing. We do a lot of compressions for our weightlifting athletes, right? Because they're squatting almost every day. So we put compressors on, try to move the inflammation in and out. Sometimes you do ice bath. You're doing cryotherapy, hydrotherapy, just for that compression factor, just to help to move the blood in and out and try to keep the inflammation, the bad inflammation down, right? But nothing replaces sleep. You know what I mean? And nothing replaces your
Yeah,
nutrition
definitely.
or your
I think
hydration.
these things like cryotherapy or maybe even just swimming, anything that relieves like weight on your legs would be also suitable for runners.
Right. Here's something that we haven't talked about a little bit, but people need to talk about. As far as when you're considering recovery,
Definitely.
recovery is part of the stress adaptation cycle, right? Which includes, the training, the fatigue, the recovery, and then the super compensation. If you train good and hard for 2 to 3 weeks, and all of a sudden you take a week to let your body deload, and then all of a sudden you go back up, you're finding out you're actually stronger. Just like some people will go in the gym sometimes and they take a week off or a day or two, and they go back there like, I'm actually stronger. I thought I'd be weaker. You know, that's because they allowed the body recover and heal. So it's setting itself up so it doesn't have to go through that stress that you actually put through it before.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking I need to work out 2 to 3 times a day every day until I fall apart, you know, which you'll see a lot of when, that can kill you.
Well, hopefully it will not. But yeah, there are a lot of people, especially like from the perspective of amateur athletes, who just exercise like day in, day out, and they are chasing some goal, but their recovery, or they are not allowing their body to recover. And I see this as a common theme.
Right. And one thing that's commonly overlooked as far as recovery is going, because we tend to think about when we talk about recovery and exercise that it's actually only has a physiological disruption, but there's also a psychological disruption involved.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so if you don't allow yourself to recover, depression sets in. And if the depression sets in, you don't have the mindset to continue working,
Yeah,
you know? And we talk about it from a holistic standpoint. Depression sets in, it starts affecting all the other environmental things, your relationships, your thought on the exercise, your thought on the program you go through. And that can have a detrimental effect in the long run if you don't get that under control and look at it as needed.
yeah, definitely. That's like kind of cycle that at the beginning exercise can help you relieve, for example, anxiety and help improve your mental aspect. But if it reaches or extends certain line, certain level, it can be actually become hurtful because, like you mentioned, it starts hurting your relationships because you suddenly don't have energy or time to meet with people that care about you or you care about. And yeah, all that you are thinking about is maybe like exercising, so you become a compulsive exerciser and you spend all the energy that you have, which is still getting lower and lower because you are just beating yourself up and not recovering enough.
Right. Which brings this whole thing back full circle back to the 4 pillars of human performance, which is the first one is mindset. So it just brings it all the way back
Yeah.
around on why they're all
So
important. And again, why I think mindset is the most
that's
important.
very nice to recap this all together. So I really thank you for your time, David. I really appreciate all the things that you have shared with me and with the people that are listening. And as I already said, it's like my mind is blown and I'm humbled by the knowledge that you shared with me. And which is good because I see that I have a lot of studying to do. Yeah.
We both do. We both do. Before we get off, I'd just like to mention, the big factors we talk about were mainly recovery and regeneration. The benefit of that, it helps with your competitiveness, right? It also helps with your skill and decision making abilities, and then overall, it helps with your improved performance, either technical, physical, or in your recovery program as well. So it all plays together. Nothing's
Yeah,
more important than the
definitely.
other.
So where can actually people who want to learn more, where can they reach you? We already mentioned the Instagram.
Right now, the best way to reach me on Instagram, go follow or reach out and direct message me if you want to. My website is actually going to probably be up at the end of the month, which is www.e3fitology, spelled FITOLOGY.com. That'll be up in a little bit, probably about another
Okay,
month. That should be
perfect.
completed.
I will make sure to put it down in the show notes as always, so people can just click through and get to you and to reach you. So I'm very excited for this episode. Once again, for all the things that you've shared with us, and I will say goodbye.